The blue lights hit your rearview mirror before you even realize what you did. Your hands tighten on the steering wheel. You glance at your speed, then your mirrors, then back at the road. Heart rate climbing. You pull over, engine humming, silence filling the car. Then comes that slow walk up to your window. The officer leans slightly, eyes scanning everything before they even speak. Do you know why I pulled you over? Now let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. What do you usually say in that moment when an officer asks you that question? Drop your answer in the comments, because I promise you this. What you say right there, in those first few seconds, matters a lot more than most people realize. And later on, I'm going to explain something that almost nobody talks about when it comes to your phone, your rights, and one small setting that can completely change the outcome of that encounter. Because most drivers think they understand traffic stops. They don't. Let's stay in that moment for a second. You're pulled over, your window is down. The officer is watching your hands, your eyes, your movements. They're not just listening to your words, they're reading you. People think a traffic stop is about a ticket. It's not. It's an investigation, always has been. Every question you're asked is designed to do one of two things: confirm what the officer already suspects, or give them a reason to dig deeper. Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Is this your car? Why were you in such a hurry? Sounds casual, right? Almost conversational. But none of it is random. Here's where most drivers make their first mistake. They treat the officer like they're just having a normal conversation. They start explaining. They try to sound cooperative. They talk more than they need to. And in doing that, they give away control of the situation. Now let's be real for a second. I'm not telling you to be rude. I'm not telling you to escalate anything. But there's a difference between being polite and volunteering information that can be used against you. Because here's how officers think during a stop. They're trained to notice inconsistencies, tiny ones. Your story doesn't match your tone. Your eyes shift when you answer. You hesitate just a little too long. That hesitation? That's enough to justify more questions. And once more questions start, the stop stretches. What could have been 5 minutes turns into 15, then 20. Then maybe you're being asked to step out of the vehicle. Let's talk about that moment, because it's a turning point most drivers don't understand. Step out of the car for me. It feels optional. It's not. Under US law, officers can generally order you out of your vehicle during a lawful traffic stop. You don't have to like it, but refusing can escalate things fast. Now you're standing on the side of the road, cars passing, wind hitting your face. The officer's tone might change slightly here, more direct, less conversational. And here's where pressure builds, because now you're out of your comfort zone. And when people get uncomfortable, they start making small mistakes. They talk more. They try to explain more. They try to fix the situation. And sometimes, without realizing it, they open the door to something much bigger than a traffic violation. Let me give you a realistic scenario. The officer asks, "Do you mind if I take a quick look inside your vehicle?" That word "mind" is doing a lot of work. It sounds like a request. It feels casual. But what they're really asking for is consent, and consent changes everything. If you say yes, you've just waived a layer of your protection. The officer no longer needs probable cause to search your vehicle. Now imagine this same situation but with your phone. This is where things get serious, because your phone is not just a device. It's your messages, your photos, your contacts, your location history, your apps, your entire digital life. And here's the part most people don't realize. Under normal circumstances, police need a warrant to search your phone. That was made clear in a major Supreme Court decision years ago. Your phone is protected. But, and this is the part people overlook, that protection depends heavily on how your phone is secured. If your phone is locked with a passcode, PIN, or password, that's one level of protection. If your phone can be unlocked with your face or your fingerprint, that's a different situation. And yes, this is where that one setting comes into play. Because biometric locks, Face ID, fingerprint scanners are treated differently than passcodes in many real-world scenarios. Courts have been more protective of passcodes because they're considered testimonial. That means forcing you to reveal a passcode is like forcing you to speak or reveal knowledge. But biometrics? That's often treated more like a physical key. Think about it this way. An officer can take your fingerprints during a booking process. That's physical. That's not considered testimonial. So in certain situations, if your phone is unlocked using your fingerprint or your face, officers may attempt to use that against you, sometimes literally. There have been real cases where officers have held a phone up to a suspect's face or used their finger to try to unlock the device. Now, does that mean they can always do it legally? No. The law is still evolving. Different courts have ruled differently. But here's the key point you need to understand. If your phone is unlocked, or can be easily unlocked without your active cooperation, you've just reduced a major barrier that protects your data. Let's go back to the roadside. You're standing there. The officer says, "Do you have your phone on you?" Seems harmless, right? You say yes. "Can I see it real quick?" Now you're in a high-pressure moment. Cars passing, lights flashing. Maybe you're nervous. Maybe you just want this to be over. So you hand it over. That single decision can have consequences you didn't expect, because once the phone is in their hand, and if it's unlocked, or if they can unlock it using your face or fingerprint, that creates a situation where your privacy can be compromised quickly. And here's something most people don't think about. Your behavior leading up to that moment matters. If you've been overly talkative, overly cooperative in a way that signals uncertainty, or inconsistent in your answers, the officer may already be looking for reasons to dig deeper. Your phone becomes the next step. Now let's slow this down because this is important. You have the right to refuse consent to search your phone. You can say calmly, "I don't consent to any searches." That's it, no explanation needed. But here's where people get tripped up. They think if they refuse, it makes them look guilty. Let me be very clear about this. Exercising your rights is not evidence of guilt. But, and this is the part people don't like hearing, how you exercise those rights matters. Tone matters. Body language matters. If you say it aggressively, if you escalate, if you become confrontational, you increase the chances that the stop becomes more intense. But if you say it calmly, respectfully, and then stop talking, you maintain control. Now let's talk about silence, because this is another area where people make critical mistakes. You've probably heard that you have the right to remain silent. That's true. But in real roadside situations, silence feels uncomfortable. Officers may keep asking questions. They may rephrase. They may wait. That silence can feel like pressure. And people break under that pressure. They start talking again. They try to clarify things. They fill the silence. And that's exactly what the officer is watching for. Because the more you talk, the more material they have to work with. Now imagine this combined with your phone. You've been talking. Maybe you've contradicted yourself slightly. Maybe your story isn't perfectly consistent. The officer now has curiosity, maybe suspicion. They look at your phone as a potential source of confirmation. Mind if I just check something real quick? That's how it happens. Not dramatically, not aggressively, quietly. And if your phone is set up with biometric unlock, you've made that step easier. Here's a practical reality most drivers never consider. During a traffic stop, your phone might light up. Notifications appear. Messages pop up. The officer sees that. Names, fragments of conversations, app icons. You might not think it matters, but it does. Because officers are trained observers. They notice details you don't realize you're revealing. Now let's talk about a common myth. If I have nothing to hide, it doesn't matter. That mindset is risky, because it's not about hiding wrongdoing, it's about controlling your information. Your phone contains context that can be misunderstood. A joke in a text message, a contact name that looks suspicious, a location history that raises questions. None of that means you've done anything wrong, but it can lead to more questions, more scrutiny, more time. And once you're deeper into that process, it's harder to pull back. Now let me give you something practical you can actually use. If you're concerned about your phone being accessed during a stop, using a strong passcode instead of biometrics adds a layer of protection. Some people even disable biometric unlock temporarily in certain situations, because once your phone is locked behind a passcode, it's much harder for anyone to access it without your explicit cooperation or a warrant. And that's the key difference: control. You want to maintain as much control as possible during a traffic stop without escalating the situation. That balance is where most people struggle. They either overshare and lose control, or they become defensive and escalate. The goal is neither. The goal is calm, controlled, and deliberate. Let's revisit that first moment again. Blue lights, pull over, window down. Do you know why I pulled you over? You don't have to guess. You don't have to explain. A simple, neutral response keeps things steady. From there, every step matters. How you answer questions, how much you say, whether you consent to searches, how your phone is secured. These are small decisions, but they stack up. And here's something I've seen happen more times than people realize. A routine stop turns into a prolonged encounter not because of what was found, but because of how the driver handled those early moments. The tone they set, the information they volunteered, the access they gave, and sometimes the phone they handed over without thinking twice. You don't get a redo on the side of the road. Everything is happening in real time, under pressure, with limited information. That's why understanding these dynamics matters before you ever see those blue lights. Because once they're behind you, you're not thinking clearly. You're reacting. And reaction is where mistakes happen. So the next time you're driving and your phone is sitting there in the console or your pocket, ask yourself something simple. If that moment happens, if those lights come on, how much of your digital life is one quick interaction away from being exposed? Most people don't think about that until it's too late. And by then, the conversation has already moved in a direction they didn't expect.